Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 106. Today, we're going to be talking about those tough parenting moments. We all have them, it's inevitable. And in fact, KJ was just sharing a story with me this morning about a tough moment that she had. So she's going to share that with us. And then the big question is, what do we do next? We're going to talk through what that looks like. So let's dive in.
Welcome to the Fiercely Gentle podcast.
Gentle parenting is not just about how we respond to our kids. It's also about who we are becoming as parents.
So many of us were raised in traditional homes and were taught to listen and comply. But now we want to do things differently. I'm KJ Altoff.
And I'm Ashley Kanazowicz. We're two imperfect moms trying to navigate parenting, overcome our triggers, and share what we're learning so you don't have to feel so alone.
Let's come together and learn how to become more fierce in our values so that we can stay gentle in our parenting.
This is Fiercely Gentle. So KJ, you were telling me this morning that you had a rough moment with your son and that unfortunately you had handled it in a way that you wished you hadn't.
Yes.
Do you want to share that with us? We've all been there. I'm sure we can all relate.
Yeah. I wasn't even going to send you that message this morning, and I was doing the dishes after my son had gone to school. And I'm like, I need to send this to Ashley because I'm going to forget otherwise. It's just one of those parenting moments that happen and then you move on from them. But yeah. I was like, no, I'm going to share this because I need to know that I'm not crazy and alone with this experience.
Yeah. And I needed the same thing when I was listening to your message. I felt validated because I had experienced similar things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, it's not just me.
That's why I love our talks, because I feel like whenever we share our parenting struggles with each other, we're both like, yeah, yep, I get it.
Been there.
I've been there, done that. Yes. It's very validating. So This morning, my son has a very solid morning routine, and my husband is the one that helps him with the morning side of things, and I'm usually helping him with the evening routine. I got up early to get some work done, and I had brought my laptop downstairs, sat in our living room, and was just working on stuff early in the morning. The house was still quiet. My husband went to wake up our son to get him ready to go in the morning. As soon as my son came downstairs and saw me, I already knew. I'm like, I should not be here right now because I am distracting him from his routine. He wants to be by me and see what I'm up to and hang out with me. So instead of going straight to the table, which he usually does to have breakfast, he comes over to the living room to sit next to me on the couch. And I said my good mornings, and my husband, I could hear him saying, bud, it's a normal school day. We got to keep moving, and I tried to nudge him along, go have breakfast. We can hang out later. After breakfast, he is supposed to go upstairs and brush his teeth. This particular morning, he comes back over to the couch because I was still sitting there. And he didn't want to move. He wanted to know what I was doing, and he wanted to help me with this project that I was working on. And I said to him, bud, just go upstairs and brush your teeth, and then you can come back down and we can hang out. Mm-hmm. I already knew I was starting to feel a little dysregulated because it was earlier than I normally get up. I was tired. I was hungry. Mm-hmm. And I was starting to get annoyed that my son wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing and staying on routine. And because I know that if he delays too much, we're going to fall behind and miss the bus. And we've done that before. And I already get anxious with time and being late, all that stuff. So,
me too.
Yeah, right. And that affects how we parent. And it affected me this morning. I was getting really irritated and really annoyed since he wasn't getting up. I just shut my laptop and I said, okay, I guess we can't do this together because you haven't done what you need to do. You're procrastinating, and now you can't help me with this project. And he got upset and finally went upstairs. 5 minutes later, I hear him calling down, asking if he could still help me with this project. And he hadn't brushed his teeth yet because I asked him, I'm like, well, have you brushed your teeth? And he hadn't. He was just kind of laying on the ground, sulking and whining. Oh my gosh. And that just pushed me over the edge. I'm like, how have you not brushed your teeth yet? And even though I've been on this reparenting journey since my son will be 9 next year, since he was a toddler, I've been working through things. And it was just it was a good reminder that no matter how far along we are in
Mm.
our reparenting journey, when we get triggered, it is really hard for us to access that part of our brain that reminds us, hey, this is your child being a child. This is developmentally appropriate. You just need to help support them through it and, I'll guide them through this challenging moment. I
Yeah.
did not have that thought in my head this morning. Rather than approaching it in that way where I could help him transition and support him to go and brush his teeth and stay on track, I approached it from a controlling place. I
Hmm.
defaulted to my authoritarian ways where I put my foot down and I wanted him to listen to me in that moment. And
Yep.
he struggled. And so did I. It was not a fun morning.
Yeah, I am just sitting over here relating to everything you're saying. It's so hard to have that kind of pause and remind yourself that this trigger is your kid being a kid and you're not about to be attacked by a lion. You don't need to jump into fight or flights.
Hmm.
And like the teeth brushing thing, my kids have the same struggle. Like they just don't want to go brush their teeth when something more fun is presenting itself.
Yeah. It's
And
such
I'm
a
like,
kid thing. That's just
yeah.
children. That's just what they do. They don't have the impulse control that we have. They have a
Hmm.
hard time staying on task when, yeah, there's something else that they would rather be doing. They don't
Yeah.
have that sense of discipline yet.
I've said this before and I'll probably continue to say it forever. I always expect my kids to be more logical than they are. And
Uh-huh.
so in my mind, same as you, I'm like, just go do the thing that I'm asking you
Mhm.
to do, and then you can do the fun thing. Like it
Right.
takes a minute, brush your
Right.
teeth, and then you can do the fun thing. That situation triggers me in exactly the same
Yeah.
ways that you're describing.
And you and I were both
So,
raised in traditional homes. And so
mhm.
a lot of the things that trigger you are the same things that trigger me. Isn't that? It's just so interesting. The way we are brought up really affects our parenting.
It really does. And I'm sure if you mapped it out, you could just get such a clear picture of how it all ties
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
So you're a parent and you have this moment, you react the way that you react, you know it's not ideal, and then your child leaves and goes to school. And now you're sitting here as the adult with this experience of, oh no, I didn't handle that the way I wanted to. What do you do? What's your next
Hmm.
move for yourself internally?
Yeah. In the past, I would have just spiraled in shame and guilt.
Same.
Like, oh, I should have known better, or that
Yeah.
I handled that terribly. I'm a terrible mom. Why did I say that? Why did I do that?
I've ruined them forever.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so over the years, I have learned to shift from that woe is me mindset and I'm a failure of a mom mindset
Hmm.
into more of what can I learn from this?
Yes.
What is something that we can both take away from this? So after he got on the bus, we were fine. He was still mad at me, but I made sure to tell him I loved him and that I understand that he's still mad at me, but that I hope he has a good day. That's what I told him.
Hmm.
When I came back inside the house, I made myself breakfast because again, I hadn't had time to eat, so I had to meet that need of mine. And I reflected and processed what had happened that morning. And I was able, now that I was more regulated, I was able to think more clearly. And I was able to remember, you know what? My son is 8. He'll be 9 next month, but he's still young and he still has a hard time completing tasks when there's something else more fun that he wants to do. And it's
Hmm.
up to me as the parent to help make that a little bit easier for him. Yes, he probably knows better, or yes, he has the ability to go do the thing that he knows needs to be done. However, there are going to be days where it just feels harder for him to do that.
Yeah.
Just like for us, you and me, as adults, we have days where we don't want to do something. We know it has to get done. We procrastinate and it makes it harder. Like it just feels hard to do the thing that we need to do. But as adults with fully developed brains, we're able to get ourselves to do it.
I
Yeah.
was going to say, if I am faced with doing the laundry or reading a book, I'm going to read a book. Like, I hate doing laundry.
Yeah.
That's not fun. Reading a book is much more fun. But like you said, as an adult, I also have the ability to see when things are a higher priority and
Hmm.
when they're more important,
Yep.
or laundry can just wait.
Yeah.
Brushing your teeth shouldn't wait. But yeah, they're not necessarily developed enough at that age to be able to prioritize those tasks
Yeah.
appropriately.
Yeah. And instead of reminding my being able to see it in that way this morning because I was dysregulated, the way I reacted then was from a place of control. It wasn't from a place of, okay, how can I support my son? It was more of, how can I get him to do what I want him to do in this moment? And so this is me reflecting. I was coming from a place of wanting control. I felt like I didn't have control in that moment because he wasn't listening and doing what I was asking him to do. And that was triggering me really bad in that moment. My dysregulation made him dysregulated because he
Yeah.
didn't like that I wasn't open to communication, that I wasn't being very kind in that
Hmm.
moment. I was being very controlling. And my son being very strong-willed, he doesn't respond very well to someone trying to control him. He responds better to knowing what the expectations are and then having some autonomy on when to complete it. And granted, he really didn't need to brush his teeth immediately right then and there. He had some time. But I just didn't want to deal with that in the moment. I was trying to focus on what I was working on because I
Yeah.
only had so much time to do it. So that was my priority in the moment. Again, I'm thinking through all of this as I'm processing what happened because this is stuff that we don't always recognize in the moment of being triggered, but after the fact, we can reflect and think, okay, so that's why it was really hard for me to stay patient with my son that morning. So that's what I did while I had breakfast is basically I just spent time walking through the situation, trying to understand where I was coming from and trying to understand where my son was coming from and also trying to figure out where the disconnection was, what caused the
Hmm.
disconnection in our relationship.
I think when you're able to sit back and reflect on how you respond and why you responded that way based on your triggers, it makes it easier for us to see that our kids are really just doing the same thing,
Hmm.
but at a younger age. It kind of makes us like on the same level. If I'm unable to perfectly respond every single time, so are they, but even
Yeah.
more so because they're little, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, that's a great point. That again, we have these high expectations for our kids. And I had a high expectation for him in that moment to just go upstairs and brush your teeth. Like it's not that hard. Just go do it. I had that expectation. And at the same time, I was not able to remain patient and supportive in that moment because it was just hard for me. And
Yeah.
yeah, and we're human and it happens. But after taking that time to reflect this morning, I also focused on what I could do differently in the future
Mm-hmm.
because I already know it was not a good idea to be downstairs while he's trying to get ready for school. So in the future, I'm not going to be in the living room when he's sitting down to try and have breakfast in the morning because it's too
Yeah.
distracting for him. So that's already something I know I can do differently in the future. Another thing is prioritizing the routine versus what I was working on because if it was so important for me in that moment to have him go brush his teeth, then I should have sooner closed my laptop and found a way to help him,
Mm-hmm.
close that bridge between him not wanting to brush his teeth and at least helping him get upstairs and finding a way to, make that a little bit easier for him.
Yeah.
So those are already two things that was able to think about of ways I could handle a similar situation like that differently in the future.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that the things that you are talking about changing for the future are about yourself. You maybe shouldn't be downstairs knowing that he needs to focus on his routine, or you should maybe set down the thing you're focusing on and go help him achieve the thing you want him to achieve.
Hmm.
Because I think sometimes we can get caught up in what I want to change
Hmm.
about my kids or
Right.
about what I can say to get them to do something different. And it's so important to change the things that are within our capability of actually changing, and that is ourselves. We can
Yeah.
change our positioning, our language, what we do next.
Yeah.
And I wanted to add, like you, I would also spiral into this like shame of feeling like a horrible mother and I've broken everything and I responded the wrong way. I think probably because I am or used to be a perfectionist. And so I feel
Hmm.
like I need to get it right all the time. And if I don't, I have failed as a mother.
Hmm.
But one of the things that helps me in my reflection when I have these moments is to remind myself that being an adult that makes mistakes in front of my children is a really good example for them.
Yeah.
Because, and I think I've mentioned this before, but if all they're seeing are adults who are perfect all the time, they're going to feel like broken in a way if they're constantly making mistakes, but we are never making mistakes. And so I
Hmm.
just try to remind myself that even though maybe I messed up and I didn't do it right, I can show them, hey, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most important pieces is what comes next.
Yeah.
As it happens, your son hasn't actually come home from school today. And
Hmm.
so you're still sitting in this reflective
Yep.
space. So when he comes home from school today, how do you
Hmm.
plan on handling that with him?
That's a good question. Yeah, this happened just this morning and we have not had a chance to repair yet from that moment. He left our house this morning, got on the bus, still mad at me.
Yeah.
And I've taken some time to process and reflect, which is important. And now the next step is for me to reconnect with him. Even though it happened this morning, the last thing I want to do is just move on as if everything was back to normal. It's
And
really
act like it never
important.
happened.
Yeah, it's really important to repair and talk through our hard moments and make sure that our kids feel validated and heard through their experiences.
Mhm.
So, my plan when I see him again after school is first to, not immediately, so I'm going to let him kind of decompress and stuff after school, right? Cuz the last thing he probably
Yeah.
wants to do is have this big conversation after a long day at school. Perhaps after we've had a chance to reconnect, maybe before bedtime, I will bring it up and I'll say, hey, can we talk about what happened this morning? That didn't really feel good for me. And I'm sure it didn't feel good for you. And kind of see what he says after that. So yeah, I guess I can't really tell you exactly what it's going to look like when my son comes back from school today because we haven't had it yet. And it really just depends on the flow. But I can tell you that we are going to spend some time processing what had happened. I want to hear his experience and I'm going to validate that. And I'm going to apologize for my side of things.
I love that. I feel like that's going to be so powerful for him and for you. Like as you're envisioning how this is going to go, I'm just like, man, the connection and the bonding that I can imagine happening in that conversation is so special.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think just generationally, a lot of families used to just sweep things under the rug. You
Hmm.
hashed it out in the moment, and if you left angry, that's just the way it was. And the next
Yeah.
time you saw each other, everything was
Oh,
back to normal.
I
And
hate that. I
yeah, and
absolutely hate that.
it doesn't go away. Like it
Yeah.
sits there. And if you're still thinking about it as the parent, I'm sure he's still thinking about it
Hmm.
to some degree. And even if he doesn't open up and become super vulnerable about his feelings, just the fact that he can come home and he'll get to experience that this matters to you
Yeah.
and that it's still sitting with you and that you want to check in and make sure he's okay,
Hmm.
even if that's as far as it goes, like that's so important for him
Yeah.
to experience.
Yeah. It's such a great way to model conflict resolution, which I never learned
Yeah.
growing up. Conflict is
Yeah.
really hard for me, especially with adults in my life. It makes me uncomfortable because it
Yeah.
was never something I really experienced because I also grew up where we just brushed issues under a rug and then the next day we pretended like there was no problem. And now when that happens to me, I can't stand it. That's a trigger for
Yeah.
me with the adults in my life. I hate pretending like nothing's wrong, that everything is
Same.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that needs to be a little disclaimer when you do start to do the work
Mm-hmm.
and you start to work on your childhood wounds and you
Yep.
start to work through your triggers. It's going to bother you when you're put in situations where you're expected to just ignore those things and move on. Because we're
Right.
like, no, we want to work through this.
Right.
We want to talk about it, conflict resolution.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
know for me, it's hard
Yeah.
to apologize to your kids when you're not used to receiving it or when you're not used to doing it. And so I just want to encourage listeners, if it feels really awkward and uncomfortable to come back around and repair,
Yeah.
that's okay. Just
Yeah.
push through that discomfort and
Yeah.
it does get easier.
It makes sense that it's so hard when you first start. It's so hard to apologize because not only did we never experience the apology, we weren't on the receiving end of one, so we don't even know what that's like. But also, we were raised to believe that adults never made mistakes.
Right.
And especially parents, that parents were always right and that the kids were always wrong. That's not what we want our kids to learn. So my son, and I'm sure your kids too, will apologize and he will come and say, "I'm sorry, mom, for X, Y, and Z." And
Yeah.
that's because I had actively modeled apologizing to him. He learned how to apologize through experiencing being on the receiving end of an apology from me, which is a totally different topic now, I know, but it's so important in the processing of a tough parenting moment and then the reconnecting and the repairing afterwards.
Yeah. And that's what I was talking about earlier. When I do make a mistake as a parent, I think, okay, so now it's a chance for me to set a good example of what making a mistake looks like.
Mm.
Not just what making a mistake looks like, but how to apologize.
Exactly. So, Ashley, what would you say is your biggest takeaway from today's episode?
Oh man, I think my takeaway is it's going to happen. The tough moments, they're going to happen. The mistakes are going to happen. We are human. We are not perfect. We are going to be triggered and handle things poorly. And that's not the most important part of it.
Mhm.
That's not where it stops. What we do next is the most important part. So even if we find ourselves in that moment, keep moving,
Yeah.
reflect on it,
Hmm.
figure out what to do next, and make sure that your next move encourages connection and learning and growth.
Yes, I love that. I think my biggest takeaway is not to spiral in shame and guilt after a tough parenting moment because it doesn't really help developing you in your parenting when you
Mm,
are worrying about the past. Processing and reflecting is all about figuring out what you can take away from that moment and what you can learn from it. Instead of thinking, I should have done this or I should have said that, when you say I should have, it really brings on the feeling of shame, like you failed in
yeah.
your parenting. Instead, you want to focus on the future and think more of what can I do differently next time? What can I do instead of this? Or how can I reconnect with my child in these moments? That's how we're going to really continue growing as parents, is if we can see each challenging parenting moment as an opportunity to learn from. Thank you for listening. We're grateful to have you in this community.
Parenting this way isn't easy. We're all learning, showing up every day, reflecting, repairing, and continuing to grow.
If anything in today's conversation resonated with you, or if you have a question or topic you'd like us to talk through in future episodes, we would love to hear from you. We'll share our contact information down below in the description.
Until next time, be kind to yourself. And remember, you are a fiercely gentle parent.